My name's Eric Moore, and welcome to the June 4th edition of the Town Meeting Study Committee. I'm the chair. Let's see, tonight, Phil Swain will be taking notes. Will be clerking. Phil, are you there? Oh,
Yes,
I see
I'm
you
here.
guys. Okay. Phil, would you be so kind as to call the roll, please?
To
Is
find
that all
it.
right, or you want to do it? If I drop it on you, you can do
Well,
it.
I don't have it handy.
Okay, I'll do it then. So Keith Bergman.
Present.
Thank you. Katie Bresnick. We're
She's not in
expecting
the
Kate.
room.
Okay. Kristen Haggerty.
Here.
Alice Kaufman, we know is not here. Leslie Koplow.
Here.
Parashar Patel.
Here.
Phil Swain.
Here,
Eric Van Loon.
he's on the phone.
Okay. And you're muted, Eric. And then Eric Moore present. I believe that Carmen will be joining, ex officio Carmen will be joining at about 7:30. Eric, I know that you need to leave early. So let's dive in. Is there anybody from the public there in the room?
We have two people.
Okay. So tonight, quick view of the agenda, public comment. We will pass on approving meeting minutes, item 2. Third item is to talk about our mission statement. Fourth, talk about our sense of the work streams. We'll take both for item 3 and item 4, we'll take a comment or question from the public if applicable. We'll talk about what we're interested in working on initially. Talk about meetings again. And then finally, we'll wrap up with talking about if we want to send something out as a communication from the group for June. So with that, we have a clerk. We've taken roll. Clearly, a bunch of us are remoting in tonight, and I'm glad that we're able to do that. I'll note, without irony, that we're making use of both remoting and probably talking for more than a minute each. So I think it's interesting to look at how this group is working in relation to how town meeting is framed. I will begin with public comments. Shannon, I will leave it to you to please to let someone start if they wish.
Okay, do you want to come to the table so we can hear you through the microphone?
So my ears can hear.
Yeah,
If the volume could go up a little bit, I'd be
Sure.
grateful.
So in principle, we're 1 minute. I'm not going to be rigid about that. I think we're learning how that works for folks. And when you're ready, thank you.
David Allen, 316 East Bridge Road.
Thank you.
People like myself are just pleased as peaches at what you're doing. I've been at it for like 15 years, been waiting for this. So grateful that frankly you take what is enormous amount of time out of your life to get this done. 2 items I've been working on are, and Eric, I passed out the handout for town meeting on remote participation. If you've been there, to check with you first,
Mhm.
did that. And I'm glad to get it to people if I can get some email addresses digitally, those who aren't here. 2 items of concern, 2 items I've been working on, remote participation and clickers, are complex in simple words. What I and those I work with have been so looking forward to is that you, this now civil committee, would dig in, get the information on it, and help the town, the citizens of the town, come up to speed on it. You can't make reasonable decisions, as we know, in a democracy. We don't have information, and for goodness sake, you are the source of that information for the town. I don't want, I'm seen as later to be shaded by what I'm about to notice, but we were deeply dismayed, frankly, that you saw fit to go out and ask the town before you'd done any work, before you'd help them come up to speed on this matter, what their views were on this, for goodness sake. Terribly important that your work get done, that you get the word out to the town. Then, of course, their views as to where they come down on these things can be informed by the work of this committee. In general,
David, thank you. That's about 2 minutes.
I was
We'll
afraid of
get
that.
it. That's okay. You get another bite at the apple, but let's go to the next
Yeah,
person
no,
and then we'll
right,
come back to you.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Are you making more comments?
No.
Okay. That concludes public comment in the room.
Oh, okay. Is there anyone online? I see no indication.
thank you.
Any comment online going once, twice? Okay, David, you can get another turn. You can keep it to a minute. We'll see what happens, but
Oh, my goodness. Up to that microphone, that's that right.
sorry about that.
No. We're all feeling our way on these things. It's going to be quite important for you to get out and do surveys. There's no question about that. You need to gather all kinds of information from all kinds of places, certainly from the citizenry. But on these hot button issues, and it's clear from town meeting just how hot button these things are. Please, only after you have done your work, gotten the word out, so people are now informed and can make informed choices on this matter. I didn't say, we've also done work on clickers. Turns out they're rather complicated too. We've done actually some quite serious work on that. I don't know whether I should do it now, Eric, or I started out, people like me. A reasonable question is, so who is this people like me? I've already tipped my hand a little bit. I started out with Arthur Stevenson before Ned and then Eric as moderators responsible for the secret ballot. I'm a kid from a farm in Indiana. I fell in love with town meeting, this direct democracy. And I looked for ways that it could be a better thing, which led to me spending short of a decade on this matter of participation. David Carr is my partner in it. Some of you will know David has been many fine things to the town, including chair of the assessors. He made residential tax exemption happen in terms of the details of it. And I could not be more fortunate to have more fine partner. We've got a cadre of people out there and they were at the mics at town meeting, as a matter of fact. Those are the people like me. Thanks for taking the time and listening.
Mr. Allen, thank you. I'll suggest if you have a handout that you can communicate digitally, the tmsc@concordma.gov email. I see it there on the slides. Is
Okay,
a
I'll
good
do
way
that,
to
Eric.
follow up. That'll get to us. So
I'll do that, Eric. Thanks.
thank you. I appreciate your comment. Anybody on?
Eric,
Yeah,
oh, sorry, when you're done, I just had a quick comment.
sure.
Okay, so this is Phil Swain. So on these two ideas that Mr. Allen has mentioned, clickers, I just wanted everyone to know that the schools in Concord had lots of clickers that they were originally going to use with the active boards and whiteboards that they have. But according to my wife, who was a teacher at Thoreau School, they stopped using them. So the schools might be a source of clickers if we're worried about the cost.
Sure.
And then as far as remote participation, I just want to mention something that we do in legal circles. We have, most states have a requirement for continuing legal education. And nowadays, a lot of that is done remotely online. And the way they ensure that people are participating and listening is sometime in the middle of a presentation, the moderator or somebody gives out a code. And in order to do things like vote or get credit for the continuing legal education, you have to have the code. It's usually a 3-digit or 4-digit code.
Sure.
But anyways, those are ideas. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned them before I forget.
Thank you, Phil. And you kept it under 1 minute, so good for you. It's tough, man. It's tough. I'm just about to close public comment unless there's anything else from anybody in the room or online.
Can you hear me, Eric, if I speak
Yes.
now?
Yes, I can, Eric. Yeah.
I did, along in the same spirit of Phil's remarks, I did want to just mention that back when I was moderator, I was approached by a Concord resident who was, I believe, a citizen of Denmark. And he said that, if I have the country right, Danish citizens were able to vote in all elections internationally, and that they were all given codes, somewhat similar to what Phil was mentioning, individual codes, so nobody could vote twice or otherwise abuse or game the system. So that may be an additional thing for us to take a look at.
Good. Thank you, Eric. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to close public comments. Seeing no one else queued up. Thank you, everyone. So next item is interpreting our mission in a pithy way. What does better look like? And so the way that I've summarized our mission statement is to make town meeting. This is actually from the warrant article. Make town meeting more inclusive, effective, and responsive to the needs and desires of the town. What does better look like? What outcomes do you see fulfilling this mission? And I'll say, it's like, oh, if we need clickers, if it's that we have X, like clickers or something like that, it's so that Y is better. It's clickers so that, arguably privacy is better or whatever. So we had a couple of things, submission from Katie, something from Eric. I took what they wrote and absorbed it into the longer thing that I wrote. But you've heard a lot from me already. So let me just open this discussion up to anyone who'd like to offer something in this moment.
This is Kristen. I'll start.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you.
Thanks to Eric and Katie for starting us off. I found it particularly helpful that you included the part about how might we assess, whether these are kind of effective tools. So Eric, thanks for putting together the commonalities of those things. And I guess one of the things that I was thinking of, and inclusive, actually one of the aspects that I saw that I hadn't thought of was about the discourse itself, and that's a contribution to inclusive. So those were the first quick takeaways I had. I guess the only additions that I would have, do you want to kind of tackle one at a time, like feedback on inclusive first?
Let's get, each of us gets a chance to say our piece.
Okay.
And then we can structure after that. I'll make a
Okay.
note that yeah.
I guess my only thoughts were when thinking about inclusive, I know one of the ideas was, well, we want to have more people. And so some of the questions that I want us to think about and answer is, well, why do we want more people? Do we want more people from certain populations? I think you mentioned underrepresented. So do we want which populations are underrepresented and that kind of thing? Do we want it to be representative of town meeting proportionally as our demographics? Is there a minimal additional number of people that we would consider it to be successful? Oh, if we get this many, this percentage increase, that would be good. And that's like maybe too fine a point, but I just was thinking about that. And then I guess with effective, in terms of accomplishing results with less time and resources to, kind of summarize it that way. I guess one of the things I was thinking about, well, how would we measure? Well, certainly we could measure in time. But is there another way? Is increased satisfaction that subjective measurement that makes town meeting more effective? Or do we really want also a criteria to be, well, we use, it's less costly now because we have less staff time and things like that. So I don't have the answers. I'm just kind of putting these all in the pot. And then in terms of responsive to needs and desires of the town, because that's such a broad swath, I was thinking, well, do we mean responsive to the needs based on the different ages of the people who come to town meeting, based on, you know, whether they have, school age kids at home or not, or, you know, other things, based on their location within town, or, and also, do we count town staff, which I would think we should, in here as well. So sometimes when we say the town, I feel the need to better define that so that it doesn't just become this black box. So those were just my quick thoughts.
Good, thank you. Thank you.
Maybe
Um,
this is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Katie.
I was just gonna jump in, Kristen, your comment made me really think about I wrote in my statement, like increasing representation of different people. But maybe you got me thinking, like, maybe it really comes down to allowing the people who want to participate to be able to participate, because I think in general, maybe not everyone wants to participate. It's going to be hard for us to target different groups based on our perception of their interest. But I think the key will be getting the people who really want to be able to be included, actually included.
This is Leslie Coplow, and I would just agree that I think that's a great point. I had written down here somewhere like, how many people care that they are going or not going? Like, if we could get a sense of that, that would be very helpful. And then I also was very struck by the point of having measurements on, you know, what would be effective, what percent would be better participation, or what we would categorize as better participation. I was also thinking about in terms of measuring, you know, how much time it takes, because in some ways we're trying to do an impossible task. We're trying to get more participation, but make it shorter. So we'll have to be and allow everybody to have a voice, but also be efficient. One of the things I was thinking about is that rather than just looking at the overall time, we could start looking at, well, what is the average time per article? That might give us a better metric, because I don't know if the number of articles is different, and then what kinds of articles take more time, and get a little more granularity on that. I don't know if we'd be able to go back and look at some past town meetings and determine that, but we might be able to do that going forward. And then in terms of inclusive representation, I thought, you know, Eric made a great point in here about how to assess representation across what subpopulations. He had socioeconomic duration of residency, which I'd never thought about, but it's a great point. I guess we talked about newcomers, but, you know, I'd love to get people who've been here like 5 years to start participating. And then age, of course, and gender.
Eric, can I just share some high level thoughts?
course.
As well? So-
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Prashant.
Excellent job of actually collating the ideas and different dimensions of these three areas. So I thought that was great. A couple of thoughts on inclusive, you know, my thought was greater turnout and broader demographics at a high level. And perhaps, and I agree, I think setting a target is challenging, but maybe we look at some other towns and see which towns have sort of the highest rate of participation, and maybe set our goal a little bit above that and to begin with. I mean, 100% is ideal. Obviously, we're never gonna get there, but maybe that might be a goal to achieve. Can we be the #1 town in Massachusetts, for example? Just a thought. And then the broader demographics may be hard to measure, but maybe just a surveying the room and see if the demographics have changed. But there may be other fact-based ways to do it. For effective, you know, work is done efficiently, I thought, and I also, another aspect which is mentioned is vehicle for fact-based discussion, right? Because there's lots of data thrown out, some of which is factual and some of which is not, and I think getting residents a bit more educated around what the facts are as the topics are being discussed would be helpful. Maybe there's a mechanism to do that, maybe not. It balances against how much time you're gonna take, so that's something to think about. And then in terms of responsiveness, just based on the survey results and conversations with folks, clearly folks want a more efficient meeting. I think we heard lots of opinions around privacy, and then an ability or a mechanism to participate, whether it's remote participation, proxy, who knows, but something so that they can actually participate. So those are the sort of high level sort of thoughts that I had as I read your material, sort of interpreting a little bit of my sense of what folks are thinking.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna go to Eric. Well, I'm actually gonna go to Keith Bergman, if that's okay, Keith. And Eric, I'll go to you last, and I hope I haven't missed anybody in the room as well. But Keith, you're up. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Keith Bergman, also, I am once again not in Concord, but I hope to be by next month. I think inclusiveness connotes that for those that we ought to pay attention to who of our entire voting population is desiring to participate in town meeting, but is somehow barred from participating because of the way the meeting is structured, whether it's when it's held, time of day, those sorts of issues. And because ultimately an open town meeting it's a it ends up being a self-selected group. All voters are eligible to attend. But it will be some smaller number than that. I think we can talk about what success might look like if there were what was our how many did we have on the opening night of town meeting? Was it 1,200 or 900?
About that, yeah.
Yeah, and then posit that against, well, what size are we capable? What is the capacity for an open town meeting? Is it the football field? Or what is it? Because certainly many communities, when they have a particularly divisive or important issue, everyone wants to show up, and it could be that the indoor structures we have are simply not going to be enough. And so I think part of looking at increasing the attendance at town meeting needs to take into consideration at what point do we trigger the need to find larger facilities, and how do we do that? Is it to connect multiple sites remotely, for example, by adding, say, the middle school along with other sites? Effectiveness, I think, comes from the level of voter information that's provided prior to town meeting, which can help the meeting itself progress more effectively. You know, the fact is that an awful lot of the articles that we take up at town meeting, there's general agreement on what the outcome should be. Even the budget articles that we might differ over, you know, $120,000 here or there, but by and large, an awful lot of time is spent in the off season heading towards town meeting to reach agreement among the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee on how does the budget pie get divided up. And in those cases where that agreement is reached among them, we ought to celebrate that and get on with it and debate the things that we disagree about at town meeting. An idea that I suggested to the moderator in discussing this committee was and a practice that I've seen. I'm on Nantucket, a practice I've seen for over 40 years that I've been here, is something called the Call of the Articles, where instead of the town moderator coming up with a list of proposed articles for a consent calendar, it it could be the town meeting voters themselves on the first night of town meeting who decide which articles we're going to discuss and which articles we don't need to discuss. And that practice of the call of the articles could, it would let the voters self-select which ones do we have such agreement on. I mean, I have to say, as town administrator in Littleton, I had many occasions where the select board and the finance committee and the school committee were in agreement on the budget, so we took yes for an answer and didn't drag out the need to have a debate over it, so that we'd have time to debate other issues. And then for the desires of the town, I think that for the people that do show up at town meeting, we want to be mindful of their time and commitment and not make it overly burdensome. And I think one way to do that, frankly, is to have 2 town meetings a year, have an annual town meeting and then a fall town meeting. If you look back over the last several years, that more often than not, a special town meeting has been called for some special purpose, some single purpose and which often might lead to just the people that are concerned with that single purpose showing up at that special town meeting. If it were a more routine matter that, let's say, financial, and I'm just saying what some other communities use, that financial articles passing the budget would come at an annual town meeting, and that zoning bylaws and other bylaws and other issues come at a fall town meeting. Just an idea and you may even see, well, do you get different attendance at other times a year? So those are some of the main thoughts that I've had about this, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Keith. Katie, I see your hand up, and Erica, I see your hand up. I think Erica saw your hand up first, so we'll go to you, please. And then we'll go to Katie after that. And then I want to make sure that we address Mark and Shannon if she's interested in speaking.
Okay, thanks very much. And I'll be relatively brief. First, I'm smiling to hear the articulation of we might need to be exploring venues that are larger and would hold more people. And thinking, boy, that's a problem I would love for us to have. That would be very good, but I think that there's a lot of other things that we can and should and will address before we get to that. In terms of inclusive, one of the things I tried to articulate was not wanting there to be a strong basis for an articulation by some people that they felt excluded, either like we're elderly and we can't get out in the evening, or we've got school-age kids and we can't afford a babysitter, or things like that. And one thing that I think we need to keep in mind, and I want to try to say this carefully, but there are people who complain about town meeting being ineffective or unfair or undemocratic or exclusionary. And they are coming from a place of they don't like the outcome of some vote. And, whether it was dog leashes or plastic water bottles, or, we all know that there have been a list of things through the years where there are in every divided question, there's going to be a minority, or there's going to be a group whose point of view does not prevail. And that's when we hear often articulated, town meeting is not representative. And it's to say that no matter what we do and how wise our recommendations are, at the end of whatever we've done, there will still be people that will say town meeting is unrepresentative because they the last thing that I'm just sticking very quickly, and that is there are a huge number of things that the moderator can do to streamline the meeting, and the power of the moderator under Massachusetts law is virtually unlimited, and that includes the relationship of Carmen to our committee. Actually, that there are a bunch of where we may be advisory to her, we may be making suggestions, but ultimately she's the one with the responsibility to make the decision whether certain things get adopted or not.
So I just want to comment on that because Carmen's not here yet. Let's just hold off on discussing the outcomes of the committee relative to a recommendation that we make to the moderator or to the select board, or through the warrant, so to speak, a potential warrant article to the town. I think your point's well taken. And I think the initial point was that the moderator has a lot of power in terms of the conduct of meetings. So I'll hold it there. Thank you, Eric.
I had
Katie,
one quick
yeah.
question about what Eric just, or what's in Eric's document, if I could. One of the, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just I'd like to get to Katie and then if it's okay, Kristen, then we'll come back to you, okay? Yeah. Yeah, Katie, if you would, thank you.
Thank you. This is Katie. I guess listening to Keith speak, a lot of his points I very much agreed with. I think for me, and you might have seen in my document, like the effectiveness piece really comes down to time. And I think we saw that in the comments that people need it to take less time. So I think, as Keith said, like, I think we just need fewer articles to be discussed in the town meeting. I really like the idea of the call, what did you call it, Keith? The call of the articles.
All of the articles,
Like,
yeah.
starting off, like, are we going to discuss this or not? First, we vote on whether we're discussing. If we're discussing, we're discussing. If everyone's in agreement already, there's no need to spend a ton of time on it, especially things like, for example, if the Minuteman budget seems to be something everybody always agrees on. So like, maybe that's something we don't need to spend time discussing. And having 2 meetings a year to allow more representation for other items that come up randomly throughout the year. But also, like, for me as a parent of young kids, I cannot be out of my house 3 nights in a row unless I want mutiny at home. But could I get a babysitter 2 nights of the year that are in different seasons? Absolutely. So I think that is something that would make it a lot easier on people in my demographic. So I'll pass it along to the next speaker.
Thank you, Katie. Kristen will go to you, and then I'd like to go to Mark Howell, if he would like to contribute after you,
I mean,
Kristen.
I've already had my question, so I'm happy to pass it to Mark.
Well, you got the mic right now, so just go for it.
Just a quick question about Eric Van Loon. One of the points that you made in your document was in terms of inclusive, it was more people and more and different, fewer repeater speakers. One of the things that when I first came to town meeting, I wanted to go through all of the public comment and write down all the people that spoke to see, like, okay, is it really like the same 12 people that speak every year?
Yeah.
But when I saw it in writing, I was like, well, I love the concept. And so I wanted to know, is that inclusive? Because it seems like it should be, right? More voices, more different voices, and not just the same people. So
Right.
I don't know how that would work in practice, but I wanted to make sure it kind of still stays on the list for discussion.
Thank you. Mark Howell, would you like to say anything? I'm gonna take that as a pass, Mark, and if at some point you want to
No,
speak up, you can.
I'm good.
Okay, all
Sorry, I
right, thank
just
you.
couldn't get to the mute button fast enough.
Sorry.
Couple of things. I do agree that preparation is really useful. And I think investment in time in preparation and voter information will result in the outcome of more efficient time. I also did have the idea that, and I didn't know that there was a formal way of doing it, of maybe giving the meeting the opportunity to decide what it wants to move through quickly. And so I think that could be extremely helpful. In terms of hard metrics of participation, I like the idea of measuring ourselves against ourselves. So if we, could make the assumption or assume that something like the presidential election participation rates of voters represents a high watermark for how much participation in the democratic process the community is likely to mount at its highest level of interest, then measuring town meeting participation against that, as I think Dinos Konatos was suggesting when he presented on his initiative that was related to submitting things to the ballot, he made a pretty convincing case that we might want to compare town meeting attendance to electoral participation as a way of sort of calibrating what success might be. Could we get close to that? Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mark. Just as an aside, Andover and their town meeting study committee report looked at town meeting turnout relative to local election turnout. And they concluded that a town meeting turnout of roughly a quarter of the local election turnout was not so bad. That was their conclusion. I think, it's funny. I think what the average person, quote unquote, thinks good participation is I don't know, right? When I say, oh, we had 5% at town meeting, and I keep hearing, oh, that's terrible, right? But at the same time, as other folks have pointed out, if we had 30% participation at town meeting, we'd be in deep trouble, right? With 5,000 people inside the high school. So I think it's a difficult metric to actually define. But I think bounding the metric by different forms of election turnout is interesting to me. So, Carmen, thank you for joining. I recognize that you're here. I don't know, as an ex officio member, if you need to be counted in the role now or not. So we're talking about making town meeting more inclusive, effective, and responsive. I think we've all gone around once. Actually, Shannon, did you have anything
Eric?
to offer? Yeah.
Oh, it's Phil Swain. I had a couple of quick comments.
Oh, okay.
But
Sorry,
I
Phil.
didn't want to interrupt you. Yeah, okay, so just two quick comments. So I agree with all of the above. More inclusive is good, and I think just making it more inclusive is gonna make it more effective and responsive. And just to give you an example, I think diversity of viewpoints causes groups like meetings to make better decisions and more effective and responsive decisions. So you look at corporate boards, they're now trying to get more diversity on corporate boards, and that's because a diverse corporate board usually has a better decision. Same in my experience with juries. When we have a diverse jury, funny thing, the jury gets things right. They usually figure it out. So I think if we focus on inclusive, we're gonna solve the other two problems. And my other point is on effectiveness. I agree with Eric, Eric Van Loon, the moderator has a lot of tools to make the meeting more efficient and shorter. And one thing I would say is frustrating for a lot of people is not the repeat speakers, but the repeat comments. And so you'll have a 2-hour debate and 3/4 of the comments are exactly the same. And I know Carmen always admonishes people, please don't say the same thing. Think about sitting down if somebody else has already said what you're gonna do, but they don't. And maybe we have to urge the moderator to just interrupt people. She has the power, or moderators have the power to do that when comment has already been made. And maybe we just have to train people You don't get to get up and just say, me too, multiple times.
I mean, that would be
Yeah.
interesting because I wonder if people think that Me Too is showing, okay, look how much overwhelming support there is if I second and third this. However, that's probably the same set of people that say it's too long, the meeting's too long. So we could do something with education that says, this is the way we all work effectively together. We agree to these norms, which is, you might feel a certain way. And I don't think we could do this, but, because, well, and like, almost, because I know we have to maintain decorum, which is fine, but what about like a red and a green panel or thumbs up? Like if you agree with the speaker, you just kind of like put it up and you don't have to get up again. I mean, I don't know when we can examine this further, but I think that's an interesting point, and I'm just considering about when we make recommendations to say, efficiency is really important and we're gonna have to sacrifice some of these other things. But thank you for pointing that out about the repeat comments.
So I will just say, Eric and Carmen can say better than me, but it's an art to moderate a meeting.
Imagine.
And so, yes, you can't just interrupt the first time somebody repeats a comment. But when we have 2 hours of repeating, that's when the moderator can use their skill and their experience to step in and say, we've already heard that multiple times.
Good. Thank you, Phil. Carmen, would you care to comment on make town meeting more inclusive, effective, and responsive to the needs and desires of the town? Acknowledging that you wrote that, but I think what would you like to what further would you like to say about that, please?
Well, thank you for the invitation to talk about that. When I think about inclusive, I think about the people who face barriers to getting to town meeting and how we might be able to reduce those barriers to enable those people who would like to come but are facing a barrier. And I'm not thinking about the people who are perfectly content to let somebody else go to town meeting and listen and participate and make the decisions, and they're feeling like, that's fine, it ain't broke, I don't need to fix it. But the people who would really like to participate and find that they're having a hard time doing so, and we all know the laundry list of reasons that why people find it hard to get there. So whatever we could do to make the meeting more inclusive, I think would be wonderful. What would make it more effective, I think that's really kind of I think about that as kind of a cost benefit analysis, because there is that balance between having full and fair debate and having respect for everyone's time. And there's tension there between those two values, and they're both important values. And it's certainly true that it's an art to moderate a meeting, and some moderators are more forceful in cutting off repetitive debate. Myself, I prefer to take a gentler approach because I don't ever want anyone to feel that they've been shut down by the moderator or discouraged from participating fully at the meeting by the moderator. On the other hand, I think it's very easy for people to get caught up in their own thing. And this is just really true in terms of, I teach negotiation at law school, and I look at a lot of studies that have been done, and it's just true in communication that we listen, we can take in a whole lot more information than we can put out, and like you have all this extra time, and so what are you doing with it? You're just formulating your own response. So it's easy for people to focus on the thing that they plan to say and the way that they intend to say it, and the quarter of town from which they intend to present it, because that can make a difference too. So it's easy for people to lose sight of that. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm very open to suggestions and recommendations on how to do that better.
Mhm.
And then being responsive to the needs and desires of the town. When I was a member of the select board and also as moderator, one of the hardest things to know is whether the people you are hearing from are truly representative of the sentiment of the town at large or not. And that's a hard thing to know. In general, people who are happy don't call, and they don't submit opinions, and they don't send emails. People who are unhappy typically do. And it's really hard to tell when you're on the receiving end of that as a member of the select board or as as any elected official, whether what you're hearing is a small vocal minority or whether it is representative of a true groundswell of feeling within the community. So, I've always struggled with that, and anything that we can do. Electronic voting is really a kind of a case in point, because I pushed that as a thing to think about and consider because other towns were doing it, and there was very strenuous objection from many quarters in town, and I know that some of that is because most people don't like change. We've always done it a particular way. We're comfortable with that. We like it. We know what to expect. And when you change something, people worry, and they think it's hard to see what the unintended consequences might be. And so what's wrong with the way we're doing it now? Why don't we just keep doing it this way? Why do we need to disrupt this? And I think there was a lot of that sentiment. And then a lot of the positive sentiment about electronic voting was, yes, let's use electronic voting, and I want to do it from home.
Yeah.
And that's really a different issue. That's a different issue. So, and then the exit survey gave us kind of 50-50 responses. So I didn't feel like I knew what the community really wanted on that issue. And my conclusion was it was an issue on which I should follow rather than lead, having put it in front of everybody to think about. So, I really do believe that how we run town meetings should be community driven. It should be community decided. We should do it in a way that reflects our own values and our own needs and desires, and that elected officials are there to serve the community. So whatever the community wants, I certainly am prepared to serve the community in terms of what it wants. So that, I'm sorry, I talked longer than I should have.
All good, thank you. I have a small follow-up. Needs versus desires, or needs versus wants. I think in my thinking, I've been thinking about that public administrators, people on boards, town officials, are people who are looking at the whole of the town and identifying needs of the town. For example, that we balance a budget, that we make an allocation. Desires, I tend to think of as sort of more from the public's perspective of, this is the outcome that I'm looking for. I want to have lower taxes or whatever. And so then there is a tension in policymaking between what we think is good for the town and the town as a whole, and what I as an individual, or I from some corner of the town may want as an outcome. Am I thinking about needs and desires the way that you think about, or is there a different framing there?
Yeah, I think so. The other thing that I would put in the category of needs is, for example, accessibility. So, to the extent that we have people with disabilities of various kinds, are we serving them as well as we could?
Mhm.
We have hearing impaired people, we have vision impaired people, we have people who have trouble driving at night, we have people with mobility problems. The Disability Commission has even at one point suggested to me that perhaps we could do more outreach to people with cognitive disabilities. So those things are needs. You could even put parents with small kids in the category of people with needs.
Sure.
And certainly older adults who or immunocompromised people, these are all people with needs. And
Good.
so I was really thinking about that as well.
Good. Thank you. That was helpful for me. We've been going for a bit, but I'd like to make sure that if there's any interest in public comment on this topic, that we take a moment to offer that opportunity. Is
David
there
Allen is
anyone?
raising his hand.
Okay, David, a hard 2 minutes, okay?
Please start your stopwatch now.
All right.
So we want more people at town meeting. I've heard it repeatedly, and I've heard it a lot of other places. Do we? I don't think we can undertake what you're doing without some grounds here for what town meeting is. It's the legislature. And what is the legislature? It's principally deliberation, presentation, and then debate. That's capped off with the democratic vote. Now, do a little thought experiment. Let's say we had 5,000 people. How would that deliberation go? It's kind of obvious. That doesn't make any sense at all. Let's consider some comparisons. Lexington, which is representative, but still is limited to 203 people. The House of Representatives has fewer people in it than we had the third night of town meeting. Okay? The issue is representativeness. Okay, representativeness. Some town, I wish I had looked it up, I haven't, did a look back over 20 years comparing town meetings with votes at the ballot box, and what did they discover? That it was representative. You need to do that. That is one of the most important things you need to do. Now, forgive me for being auditory about this, but I believe anybody thinking about this will be clear on that subject. And let's notice their standard was people voted at the ballot box. That's self-selected. We know the folks who go there are not the folks who didn't go there. And that's a fundamental issue that lies behind democracy. If people are not interested in being members of a good democratic government, we got a bigger problem in River City than just town meeting. I suggest that is the way to think about this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Parashar, I see your hand. I'm sorry, I missed it. Katie, I see your hand as well. Any other public comment before we come back? Okay, thank you. Parashar?
Yeah, I think David raises a good point, because I fell into this trap also. I think, at least I sort of assume the current state of town meeting, which is everybody show up. I think we actually ought to consider, as we talked about the first night, is this the first night or the third night? This notion of, hey, is representative town meeting off the list? Implicitly, when I read the material for today and even in my comment, I didn't even consider that, and I sort of kicked myself for not stepping back and asking at the end of the day, would a representative town meeting meet all the criteria we talked about? And I think that's worth exploring a bit personally before discarding it.
Well, it's interesting. So you think discussing it earlier would benefit? I guess I was wondering if it would come as a potential solution, right? So if we defined kind of this is where we're aiming and then we all go off, no, I don't know. We all go off and break into our groups and we kind of come back and say, this is kind of what the research that we found. And then we say, well, this is,
Oh, the reason I did is
Yeah.
because I explicitly said more people, right?
yeah, right. Oh, exactly. And so
And
that's,
that's why implicitly in my mind, I sort of said, oh, I kicked that out, but I think you're correct. If I leave that part out and talk about representativeness and broader demographics broadly, we could get that with representative
right.
meeting. So
Yeah. And
that was my notion of how to measure. And
Got
that
it.
was so that led me on a different path.
I'm concerned about misunderstanding. I don't want to speak out of line. But I was talking about representativeness in an
Right.
open town meeting.
exactly.
Yes, representative town meeting is an option, but I'm pointing out that a
Yeah.
town went out and looked and they discovered in open town.
No, I heard that last part clearly, but
And
your thought
And-
triggered this notion of, is that a possible solution for potential?
And I suggest that's one of the first tasks you need to take on here.
Oh, but see, that's interesting because the question that I asked, would a larger number of people, just sheer volume, change the outcomes, right? And it almost seems like that's not the point. The point isn't necessarily to change outcomes, because particularly if we're already representative, whatever proportion we have. Whether that's we haven't measured that at our town yet, but the other town did, but it seems like it's more like a good faith gesture, right? That we want people to feel more personal satisfaction. It's gonna be a much more subjective measure. So I see them as two different things, right? I'm not disagreeing with the fact
What
that
are two different-
I'm seeing, if we could demonstrate that the population that shows up at town meeting is representative of the voting population of the ballot. But that would mean we wouldn't try to change anything, but we're trying to, I think, change this, or at least we're trying to propose changes to the status quo to see if we could increase resident satisfaction. And perhaps that gets people more engaged. And so that's why I think it's very possible it's representative, especially I remember somebody coming in and saying, well, this isn't very representative because I'm one of the only people with young families here. But I distinctly remember the population of Concord is aging, so like, I was like, well, it probably is very representative, that kind of thing. So, but these are such great things to just put on the table first.
Yeah,
Good.
maybe I'll.
Thank
jump
you.
in.
I'm sorry.
Katie.
Yeah, oh, yeah, Katie, go ahead. I
Just
just want to
gonna jump
comment, sorry, just for a second. So it's almost 8 o'clock. I'd like to conclude this very interesting discussion. I think though I'd like to wrap it up in about 5 minutes, if that's okay. I want to make sure that Parashar and, well, you just spoke, actually, Katie, you're about to
Sorry,
speak. I see Keith as well. So maybe the next two speakers and then we'll move forward, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great
Okay.
idea. I was actually gonna mention the time and how we wanna kind of decide on what we are determining to be how we're defining these things, but I actually before we do that, just a comment about measuring representativeness. I actually don't know how that would have been possible, given the data we would have on the people in town compared to who arrive. So maybe we have their political party as part of their voting record and age. But I think there's very few other factors we would be able to measure against, given the pre-existing data that we could tell representativeness if we care about things beyond those items. So just a thought or something to consider as we're thinking
Yeah.
about our own data collection.
I'll say very, very briefly, thank you, Katie. There's an academic survey from a guy named SAIZ, SAIZ at MIT that looked at representativeness. And I think as we prepare a survey, it would be good to look at that. And my instinct is that we can do something through the rolls, so to speak. But I think asking really through a survey is going to be the best way to understand that. But we'll see. We'll see. Keith, I'd like to go to you, please.
Thanks. Since the issue of representative town meeting has come up, just a comment. when I spoke earlier about what is our measure of success, are we looking, if we had 1,200 people show up on the first night of town meeting, is that good enough, or do you want to double that, or or to create a situation where we need a larger facility? I think it's helpful to have representative town meeting as part of that discussion, and because there's a continuum where you look at how large the community is, and if you don't think that the self-selected folks, if impediments to participation are removed, so that all those who are self-selected and want to participate in an open town meeting can do so. My guess is you might have 1,500 people. But let's just say, that's what it might be. If you get much larger than that, and maybe even if you get that large, you're moving into the category of, well, there are better ways to be representative of the of a large population. And that's when I think a representative town meeting can come in as an example. I grew up in a town, Danvers, which has a representative town meeting. I remember working for the town when I was in graduate school in the early 80s, and all of the action at that town meeting took place at finance committee meetings, where the newspaper printed attendance of town meeting members at the FinCom hearing. So all the discussions took place there. That's highly unusual. That's certainly not what happens in Lexington or Arlington or other Brookline, other towns where the representative town meeting goes on for weeks at a time. But it's a possibility. It's a different structure, and one that we ought to include in our considerations. But personally, I'm hoping that we can do as good a job as we can in making open town meeting as responsive to the voters who want to participate. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Keith. Mark Howell, please.
Just a couple of quick thoughts. It seems to me that it might be possible to compare town meeting attendance to, based on the voter registration rolls, to the participation in the election, and also maybe merge that with data from the town census that might give a lot of the sort of demographics that would be useful, household size, and maybe have children kinds of information, by way of sort of answering that general question of whether or not, how representative is it. I think also, in addition to that, though, the surveying an opportunity for people to provide input into this committee's work directly, some question that gets at the notion of, do you think that the results that are being achieved at town meeting, represent what you want to see, or are you somehow frustrated by your ability to participate? I think that's the question that we're all circling around, and I think the only way to get that is to try to really find creative and thorough ways of asking people what they think.
Robin, I'm trying to predict. Thank you. I'm trying to predict what you're going to say, and I think it's going to be that we need to be actually pretty careful about how we do a join like that across different roles. But I'm going to find out what you think. Please.
So actually, I just wanted to contribute a few data points. One is that when we talk about the number of people participating, Acton just had a town meeting with 2,400 people, which broke a record for the town of Acton. And I believe the issue was an override budget for the schools, and they managed that meeting by hosting it in multiple places within Acton Boxborough High School. So they handled all those people. And then after the issue that people cared about, the meeting went immediately to 500 or something. So That's one observation. You know, there are ways to handle large numbers of people if we need to. Another observation is that the 1996 study committee in Concord, you probably noted that, you know, their conclusion was that representative town meeting would result in less access rather than more for voters, and therefore they were not in favor of representative town meeting. So it's just a thing to think about, that the real benefit of open town meeting is that any registered voter can come, can speak, can make amendments, can shape a proposal and can vote. And in a representative structure, that is not possible for voters who are not actually elected to vote at town meeting. And then finally, I wanted to note, you know, I think that one of the open town meeting is, in fact, I think when you've got a large population community like ours, open town meeting is a de facto representative town meeting. It's people who have self-selected to come to participate in town meeting. It was the town of Andover that spent a lot of time looking at whether those self-selected people were representative of the town at large or not. And you can go and look at their study. They did look at a bunch of different parameters. Their conclusion was that the demographics looked the same at open town meeting as it did at the polls for town elections, and that therefore they concluded that open town meeting was representative. Now, I know one can fault that, you know, in terms of the analysis and the data. And then finally, I just observed that whenever there is a contentious issue at town meeting, the losing side is always, in my experience, not only as moderator, but as a select board member and as a citizen before that, the losing side is always completely persuaded that if more people had come, or if the question had been put to the town at large, their side would have prevailed. And that may just be the human condition. And, you know, I'm not sure what we do about that, or how we would reassure people that it wouldn't have mattered. The North Andover is one of the largest communities in the state that still has an open town meeting. They regularly have 2,000 or in excess of 2,000 people participate in their open town meeting. Their moderator has people participating by virtually, you know, whether they're, I don't remember whether they're watching on closed cable TV or live streaming, or I don't think it's Zoom, but he does take a straw vote of the people who are watching at home to see just this information, you know, or the people at home voting the same way as the people in the room who actually can vote because they are physically present. And in his experience, the vote has always been the same. So that's just a few thoughts.
Good, thank you. Kristen, I see your hand up, and I wanted to return to Katie's question as well. Would you go, please?
You have a question?
Oh, yeah.
My question is, we're talking about town meeting because that's the legislative process, but much of the work happens in the hearings and all of the work prior to that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that this group can do that would influence the efficiency at least of town meeting based on, all of the work that happens prior to town meeting.
I'm gonna run with that question and segue into the next piece, because I
Perfect.
think there's a chunk to do that. I think, so we talked about a lot of different things. I think there were some themes here. I wish I were a little sharper. I could like tell you what they were. But I think there were some definite themes. Inclusive is easier to get to. Effective is both efficiency and just, the debate is really about the good bits, right? We want to have the good bits and ignore the dull bits, as it were, to be efficient and to have good debate. But I think the right thing to do is to take what we've talked about and digest it a bit, and then try to produce, I think, perhaps a pithier version of the thing that I wrote that really emphasizes, I think, the themes that surfaced here. And with that, I'm going to move ahead to the next piece of our agenda, which is the work streams. So when I mean work streams, I think, it's themes, these 4 themes that I talked about last time, and the topics within the themes, and then the things within topics that are like tasks. And I think, the question is really, where do we want to start? So for example, Parashar, if I were to sort of, not to pick on you, but just to say, it sounded like you had some energy for exploring representative town meeting. Where you want to focus is really up to you. Initially, I think, we don't need to vote on that. I think it's just a matter. So what I want to say is, here's a framework that I put forward, right? There's a long document with more details, it's a sketch really of different tasks underneath this framework. This is just the top 4 themes, and then under each of those themes, the topic areas. So I just want to ask, did people take a look at this? Is some things are going to resonate for this group and some things maybe won't? Are there things here that are there things that are missing from this that we want to make sure that we address at the topic level?
Eric, I just have a question. This is Katie. For
Yeah.
the previous topic, not to bring us back, but so you're gonna produce like a kind of pithier version, as you said. Are we going to vote kind of on what the kind of final charge, I guess, maybe is of us, so we know what we're kind of aiming towards with these topics, maybe for the next meeting?
I'm thinking about that. I think, I'd like to see the minutes. I wrote a lot of notes myself. I'd like to watch the video again and produce a summary. I think that would be an interesting thing to use as the body of a communication to the town, to see if the town is thinking what we're thinking. I personally don't see a need to vote on it as sort of a binding mission statement for the group. I see it as something more like a set of centroids, or points of interest that, as we work, we want to address. I could be wrong about that, but that's my intuition. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I just wanted
Yeah,
to
okay.
understand that what was
Yeah.
next, so thank you, appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, in spite of all the rubric stuff, I'm trying to sort of not impose too much structure on our process. Yeah. So in terms of the themes and topics here, are we feeling like this is a good set of things to potentially look at? Are there things that are missing?
I hope not.
Maybe one thing that I was thinking about is like where our soliciting public comment would come in under these work streams, and maybe I'm missing it where it's supposed to be in here, but I'm just curious
Yeah.
where that.
Under community well, everywhere really, but under community engagement, I think, when I say customers, I'm talking about the public. And I think that there's going to be both a survey that addresses our questions there. And I hope that we have focus groups to talk about experiences and potential experiences. And then the engagement as well, I think is speaking, I think kind of to the way that Mark was talking about looking at turnout. That would be more data analysis focused, I guess.
So Eric,
Yeah.
I have a different view. I think
Good.
these overlap a lot, and I think they're good you know, goals or tasks, but I wonder if you could combine them into, instead of 4, to me, it's really 2. Operation and communication kind of go together, at least the way you've defined them. And the civic deliberation and community engagement kind of goes together.
Okay,
So I just wonder whether you could just have operations and communications as one work stream and civic deliberation and community engagement as a second, and then or come up with different titles, but that incorporate those two. Because I think
Okay.
it's almost breaking it down too much.
okay.
We're gonna overlap.
You know, where I hope we go with this is that we have a day meeting and a night meeting. You know, and now whether or not the day meeting is dedicated to logistical stuff, you know, operation communication, and the night meeting is dedicated to sort of the civics and survey stuff, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or if we just completely mix it up, I don't know. I think, you know, what's important for me is that we have a framework that allows us to cover the things that we need to cover, and not so much. So I'm looking at this as sort of a logical map and not literally a way to organize meetings. So I respect your point about there's a lot of logistical stuff there and a lot of sort of what's it all about stuff on the bottom. But I don't sense that we have a lot more discussion on this, so I'm going to move forward if that's all right.
I would just briefly point out that accommodations could probably be expanded to be accommodating limitations to attendance or something. You know, Carmen ran down a really good list of
Yeah,
sort of attributes that might, you know, inhibit somebody's ability to participate, and it I mean, disabilities might be one of them, but it's certainly not the whole picture there.
yeah, point well taken, Mark. Thank you. I think I used that language from the warrant article,
Yeah,
but in the longer document, there are a few tasks under that I think speak to a broader sense of accommodation and obstacles. So thank you. Keith?
Yeah, I just had the comment that I think when I saw this breakdown at the last meeting, that voter information was under communication, or maybe that's where I put voter information.
But by that, I'm sorry, you mean by informing the voter?
No, the information, well, the information that the town provides to voters for town meeting.
Okay, yeah, we're on the same page about that. That's
Yeah,
communication
so-
in my book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, we can hope it's education, but I think it ends up being information. And we hope they'll learn something from it, but I think it's ultimately the quality and quantity of information that voters get prior to town meeting, I think is critical to how well prepared they're going to be at town meeting. And I think that needs
agree. Yeah.
focus and worthy of being called out as a bullet item there. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Agreed. Parashar, I see your hand up, please.
Well, Eric, I'm gonna give this as probably an example of where there's some overlap, but assessing, you know, under the operation, you've got other towns and assessing meeting procedures employed by other communities. I think we
Yeah.
could probably say the same thing about how other communities communicate and deliberate before town meeting.
Yeah, you're totally right.
As well as the form of deliberation, right? And that you've got under the civic deliberation piece, so
Yeah,
maybe pull that one out and think about saying, hey, we're gonna use the experience of what other towns are doing to inform maybe at least the first 3, maybe even the 4th work stream.
sure. I hear you there. I think
But
the
all.
comparative stuff is kind of fundamental to I think all of the other stuff actually. So yeah, and frankly, I would suggest that certainly an early stage task would be to start with the looking at what other towns have done and their studies and what they're doing. And you know, that the dimensions of that rubric could reference what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I almost
Yeah.
wonder if there's like a phase one and a phase two, like phase one
Hmm.
is where we look at what other towns are doing and we collect some sort of data from the community where we're seeing what people actually want and need.
Uh-huh.
And then go into phase two where we talk about how we address some of those items. If there's something every town is doing and we're not doing, like that's maybe something we should be doing and we don't need to
Right.
spend a lot of looking into. But if we're all kind of piecemeal doing a lot of things, I feel like there might be a lot of duplication of work. Where maybe some of these earlier prep steps might be useful.
I think it's just that's just the right question, I think.
I like that idea.
Yeah. So, where would we like to start? Just in terms of individually, what we'd like to address? And this isn't like, you know, oh, only I am the hearings person. I just would like to capture, you know, where we're just going around where, some, you know, in terms of topics where you'd like to focus some interest on. Or to your point, Katie, do we say that as a committee that we start with just doing the other towns' work over the next, say, two meetings?
Like, so for example, were you had thought on that? I don't know if he was asking you specifically.
Oh, I don't know. I think it would be useful to like get some ground information first about what other towns are doing and what our people want. To then inform the rest, but I mean.
I mean, I guess I was thinking along those lines, like, so if we said that our goal for inclusivity, it was to decrease barriers for, you know, identified groups or subgroups that want to participate. Then our first steps would be like, okay, what are those groups? And what are the barriers and what have other towns done to address those?
Sure.
You know, so like kind of asking a couple of questions and then going out to find that information and bringing it back and say, okay, this was the first phase. And then we, you know, like, and then the other part would be like for effective. You know, if we said we want to have full and fair debate in the briefest time possible, then the first phase would be like, well, what makes it long? And then we kind of look at, you know, we come back and say, these are the things we've identified that, you know, really kind of add up in time. And this is what we researched about. You know, either the length of other people's meetings or the number of warrant articles. And I want to be careful. I don't know how much work we have to do. You know, we probably don't have to be that diligent with the investigation necessarily. But that's what I was thinking is like, if there were a few questions up front that we tried to answer and then bring the information back, that would lead to kind of the next step. That's
So
more.
if I restate that, Kristen, it would be what's broken right now. What is making things not inclusive or not effective or not responsive? Does that speak to your point?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I had a funny, it's not funny, but like, you know, there's this question, Carmen had talked about how in the COVID town meeting, the 2020 meeting, how it was really short and actually kind of fun in a way. And, you know, and it's 3 hours long. And I think it would be interesting to go back and look in more detail at that meeting. And I think a different question, but related, you know, is if we were going to normally have a 3-hour town meeting, what would we be jettisoning, right? And a different way to think about that question is what would a perfect town meeting be, right? You know, I think I can't even answer that right now, but I think if we talk about, you know, given that we've talked about these different elements of the mission and applying them, what's a vision of a really, really great town meeting? And it could be, you know, it's not just a single instance of a meeting. It might be, you know, a meeting where there's a high, you know, an article where there's a high, you know, high tension, or where there's a really big consent calendar. So is it useful to sort of talk about our visions of a really great town meeting as part of the ground, as part of the early phase, what we're trying to get to?
I think it would be interesting to see if our group vision of what that town meeting looks like is the same or different. Because if we all have a very concrete idea of what that, once we get to talking, like what that looks like, well, I mean, maybe that will help lead us in the direction more easily. I don't know.
So I go back, I guess, as I keep thinking about these questions and answers in my mind. An
Yeah,
ideal town meeting that's open meeting may be
Yeah.
different than an ideal town meeting that's representative, and so do we tackle that first, or do we believe it's a solution, as Kristen was suggesting, maybe it's a solution, but
I think it's a solution. I think, you know, if we talk about what we really want town meeting to feel like, as it were, what that experience is, then, you know, I think it's a question as to whether or not how we get there. But sorry, someone else was going to say something. Was it you, Kristen? Or Katie?
I mean, I can, but I can wait.
So are we talking about, this is Leslie, are we talking about right now discussing what is a great town meeting? Or are we talking about that would be a part of phase one? I'm a
I
little
think
confused.
part of phase one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so not discussing right now, got it.
I think I have a question too about phase one, in that you are also talking about gathering some data, I think, and I'm wondering how you're suggesting doing that. If you are suggesting a survey right out of the gates, or if maybe you were thinking of trying to hold a more publicized public forum.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't think we could put together a survey in like a couple of weeks. or something
Right.
That would like capture all the points we want. I was thinking like something like a focus group or like some sort of community.
Yeah,
forum,
we
just to
could do
hear
a
like
community
beginning
forum.
thoughts from people who have been excluded and why that is and what the kind of key points for the community are, that so we can make sure we're incorporating them.
so I guess I feel a little differently about asking residents for their thoughts early on. We've got the feedback. I mean, I think most of us were at town meeting. We got the feedback that was pretty detailed from what Carmen told us. Right? We all have a sense, I think, of what we think they want. I think we ought to actually, I agree, I like the idea of phase one. But I think we should have a better structured data gathering exercise from what other towns are doing. Right, to understand what they're doing, et cetera, so that we can then at least begin to develop an outline of, hey, we think this is effective or this is better, et cetera. And maybe have a public hearing, present what we found and a little bit of the direction we're going. And then ask for people to come in, maybe with structured thoughts or something, rather than just sort of open-ended, because I feel like we're gonna get what we already heard from.
Yeah, totally. I think that sounds like a great idea.
I think you could also maybe do some further digging into the town meeting survey data, like we could compile it more effectively
Yes.
for you all. I think when we sent it to you for the last meeting, you guys looked at it, it was pretty short notice, and we just like gave you some PDFs. We could probably make it more easier to work with for you all and try to draw some.
Well,
Some
Eric had
conclusions
suggested
from
some
it.
subgroup analysis, so I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I agree, it would be more helpful to have the town meeting survey data organized better for us. And I wonder whether there's some other source that we can go to for information on other towns. I don't know if Eric or Carmen has any knowledge about that from the Moderators Association or something, but I'd just like to know more than this anecdotal stuff. Like, we've got anecdotes about North Andover, Littleton, Nantucket, Wayland or somebody, but it would be helpful just to know what everybody does. Lexington has a representative town meeting. My town that I grew up in, Norwood, had a representative town meeting, but there's 351 towns. Let's find out how they all do it. And just,
So,
it must be available someplace, and just start with that and whatever other organized data there is on how other towns do conduct their town meetings.
Carmen, I'll come back to you in just a moment. So we're talking about a phase one where you know, part of that is going out and looking at other towns in a structured way. Part of that is digging into what we do know about people's experiences here, and understanding better what what specifically is not inclusive or not effective or not responsive. And, you know, maybe an instrument for that is a focus group or focus groups. We have, you know, what I raised, what's a really great town meeting, right? You know, and I think with that as well as, you know, for a really short town meeting, what do we give up? So scenarios of future town meetings, so to speak, and it's probably work on that. I think, you know, so item D, focus groups is perhaps a bit redundant with respect to item B. But what I want to get to, and then the item E is what can we do with the data that we have in hand to better understand sort of the patterns of town meeting. So I want to throw those out as different things that we could work on over the next 4-week time frame. Is there something else that might fit in a phase 1 that we can describe in a pithy way? And then Carmen, I'll come back to you. Carmen, I'll go to you, and then we can think about what else for phase 1.
I just wanted to respond to the Phil's comment about what data we might be able to bring from other organizations. The Mass Moderators Association certainly does have some collections of data, and I've been remiss in not sending to Shannon yet the other town studies that I have collected, but I will do that this later this week. And if there are specific questions that this committee has, I have the capacity through the Moderators Association to ask my fellow moderators who are members of the organization specific questions about how things are done in their towns. So you know, that is an avenue. And I believe that Mark, through the Selectmen's Association and also through the Mass Municipal Association, they collect some data too. So that, you know, depending on what it is you're looking for, that's another source of data. So I certainly can help with data collection if the committee simply identifies what it is that it would like to know.
Thank you. And Shannon, to your point about a survey, I think that a survey, the townwide survey, is a bit of a lift, and I think I'd like to have a coordinated look at what information would be seeking through a townwide survey or surveys, as well as other surveys, for example, for town volunteers. So I don't see that as a phase 1 thing, but I would like to feel like, you know, we have some things that we need to understand better coming out of phase 1 as an input to perhaps a survey in phase 2, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Cool, thank you. So who would like to work on what? And it's not like you have to pick something, but I'd like to feel like, sorry?
Eric, I was gonna regret what I'm about to say, and it leads to an answer to your question. But I will volunteer to put together a survey. And maybe we can do this in parallel. If we put together a generic, I don't want to say generic in a bad way, but a basic scenario set of questions that we can then review, adjust, and then maybe what we can do, Carmen, is to ask for your help to send the survey to the association, and in return for giving responses, we would collate it and share the results back with the association. And so that way we get a structured set of questions versus piecemeal of one town did something 3 years ago and whatever. That might, and not to discount that, because that can provide a lot of color, but we get a structured response back in the here and now. And I'll raise my hand to actually take a stab at the first set draft set.
So Parashar, I think I almost agree with you, but I want to make a distinction. So I mean, a survey, right, is a specific set of questions to, you know, some sort of a specific sample. I think that what you're talking about, and I agree with you, if I understand you right, is what do we think we need to know that we don't know yet, right? And that, so
Yeah.
they're questions for inquiry. They're not necessarily going to be come through a survey instrument, but they're things that we'd like to know. And I think having a big list of questions would be good. And we can identify for a given potential source, like the MMA, or through, if I get that right, or through the town, that these different sources might be good ways of understanding those questions, of getting answers to those questions. But I'd like to frame it that way, not as a survey, but as things that where we need to do active inquiry on. Is that fair?
Well, actually, no, I was gonna push back a little bit because
Yeah,
I was talking specifically, if we talk about gathering information about what other towns are doing, in my mind, is send a survey question, date, and ask the following sets of questions, how long your meetings, all that sort of stuff. And that way we have a data set from the towns. There may
I
be
see, to
other
other
questions
towns.
we might want to ask other stakeholders. And
Yeah.
that might come through either different surveys or other mechanisms. I was talking narrowly about the other towns.
I see.
I agree with Parashar that we should do that. But I don't want to slow this down too much, but I think it would be a better survey if we first got the studies that have already been done and looked at those, because I think that's gonna help inform our questions going forward, because it's gonna give us ideas. And who knows,
Yeah.
maybe one of these other towns has done exactly what we want to learn. So I'm gonna suggest, and I also, Eric, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm gonna suggest before you assign us to one of the 4 workflows, that we do a little bit more of this research before we do this, because
Yeah,
I think it'll be more efficient once we've educated ourselves more. So not do it tonight, but wait until we've gotten through pretty much through phase 1 as a
Yeah,
grand committee.
I agree with you. I'm not interested in assigning people to workflows at this stage, 1 of 4. I think, at this stage, I'd like to see who'd like to work on what, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but let's get cracking on some stuff, and then see what we learn over a 2 or 4 week period. I think I don't see a real advantage to sort of, locking in a structure rather than figuring out, who can come to what meeting at this point. That's my opinion. I think, Parashar, I think there's going to be and Phil, there's not going to be a perfect list of questions for any given source. So I would encourage you to get, go for it. Just write down what you think makes sense for asking other towns. I think, respectfully, we need to look at what they've published before we go ask them those questions, I feel. So there is a little bit of left hand and right hand involved, but I don't think that we benefit by looking for a perfect sequence of sort of organizing the questions. I think, write out what you'd like to know. Someone else take a look at what they have, and let's figure out even case by case, or you figure out even case by case what you want to ask a given town. But there's a lot of information out there. How do we wade through it? What do we actually need to know to help us inform our judgments? And then how can we go about it in an expeditious way?
This is Katie. I agree with your suggestion. I think we can probably work in parallel because my guess is putting together a survey and abstracting data from these previous reports. Like the survey is going to take a little longer than a data abstraction would. I kind of see this as like looking into those reports and maybe having some systematic form where we can like check off what each town has said, like what are their recommendations? Is this recommendation seen across the towns? We can do some sort of summary of what that looks like. I have previous experience doing data analysis, et cetera. I was actually thinking maybe I could take the town survey information and do some stats from it and produce some slides for review by folks as my first step.
Sure. Okay, so Katie, I'm going to put you down next for E, right? What can we do with data in hand?
Yes.
Parashar, I hear you looking at looking at other towns in a structured way.
Yep.
If that's fair. And then
Yep.
Phil as well. I think I hear you have some energy for that too.
Yes,
It sounds like I'm gonna look at the scenario stuff because I haven't really explained it well yet.
I'm interested in that too, Eric. This is Kristen.
Okay, cool. Good.
I lost track of what the letters are, but I'm interested in communication.
Yeah, So,
We didn't do
You
that.
didn't
yet.
put it on this list yet.
Oh,
the phase
darn.
one.
Yeah.
yeah, we're
But
just looking at
I
the
see
phase
that's
one stuff, but you know what?
But it might fall under scenarios.
That's
Leslie.
fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Uh,
Or
um,
it could fall under B also.
Yeah, I'll do B.
good, okay.
Thank you.
Keith, anything make sense to you in the near term?
Well, I was ready to sign up for the operation and communication about 20 minutes ago, but I see we've progressed from that.
It's a, you know, we have a lot to do there, right? So, I mean, if that makes sense to you, then I'm happy with that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of what I think I could contribute falls in that category, and that'll give me the motivation to put it in writing and
Yeah.
share it with others.
Just as an aside, if you had an example of the Littleton town meeting book to share, that would be really good for us.
Okay, yeah,
Please.
I do
Yeah.
have that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was struck by that. Thank you. Okay, so we have some things to work on then.
Maybe one
and-
item, does Alice work at the bridge? I'm wondering
Yeah,
if we
well,
could.
yeah, I will reach out to the
Communication.
bridge and understand their editorial policy around stuff from the town. I don't want to involve Alice directly because she's on the board for the bridge. But I'd like to understand how things work there, because clearly we're gonna spend some time, you know, getting stuff out. We hope getting stuff out through there. My intuition, I could be wrong, is that if we put together a press release, then and let the bridge know about it, then that becomes an opportunity and an editorial process for them to talk more with us. But I don't know. Carmen, you probably know better than I. You do know better than I, but
Eric, I will email you and Celeste at the bridge who has been taking the lead on reporting about town meeting and town issues. So I'll email the two of you to connect you.
great, thank you. So I will get I guess Phil, I'll get this out to you for the minutes. It's just an email from us, you know, this is
Yeah.
actually, yeah. And we can run with that. So looking at time, it's about 20 of, I want to go to the next item, which is really you know, when we're going to meet next. And let me just say a few things, right? So town meeting is looking like it's going to be in early June next year. That's not definite, but what it means is that the timelines are a bit stretched out and not clear. I think, you know, it may be clear by the end of June this year as to what, you know, what the dates are for things that we need to think about. But there's some uncertainty that way. We do want to make regular updates to the town. Obviously, we've got open meeting law to work with respect to. And, you know, I think, you know, we're going to be working a lot over Zoom. What I see in sort of some of the stuff that I put together is that it's a kind of a loosely coupled problem space. I mean, there's this core thing about what do we think town meeting is supposed to be, and how you know, what we need to fix in it. But I think working from that set of premises, you know, what we think about in terms of how electronic voting might work, or in terms of how, you know, communication from the hearings processes might work, those are loosely coupled, and so we can work on those in parallel. I think some research, like the townwide surveys, do need coordination. I think, you know, Parashar emailing different towns doesn't need coordination in that sense. But, you know, when we think about the different things that we'd like to understand better across the whole function space of town meeting, I think we do want to coordinate that a bit. And, you know, we're going to need to figure out, I still don't know, you know, in a corporate setting, you know, we would use an issue management system and a shared file system, or, you know, some sort of a wiki or whatever to share research and track work. I think, you know, in the public setting, I'm not actually really not sure what to do, what the standards are for work. But my overall sense is that if we can work in an agile way, which is to say that we're working incrementally, We take a task, we work it, we talk about it as we need to, and try to bring it to closure. Is a good approach for the kinds of things that we have to do. I think it's interesting, I wasn't expecting that we'd sort of identify a phase one, but I think that what we've done tonight is to sort of go, look, our work really needs to begin here. So we're going to start there, see what we learn, and then figure out what we do next. And so to my perspective, that's a good approach. And so I just wanted to throw out sort of, when we think about meeting together, rather than sort of going, look, I'm in this subcommittee and we're going to meet here, and you're in that subcommittee, we're going to meet there, is to say that really I see three different kinds of meetings that we're doing, right? One's a working meeting, like tonight, actually, and I see that as almost a seminar where we bring in what we've learned, we talk about it, we talk, to the extent that we need to about where to go next with that topic or theme or task. And it's like a seminar, right? So who shows up is who shows up. We've got a quora. It's a pretty frequent meeting. A different meeting is information seeking in public. So for example, Carmen, at some point I'd like to interview you, right? And we could do that, offline or online. Or I'd like to interview, for example, current and former clerks or whatever, right? But I think that kind of meeting is one that we could conduct. It's a form of inquiry, information seeking that we could do in public. And again, a focus group would fit that as well. So that's a quora. And again, it's this kind of thing that we do as needed. I'd like to see a regular cadence for the working meetings. Like we know it's every other Tuesday evening or every other Thursday afternoon. The hearings are as needed. And finally, the recommendation meeting. And this is where we go, okay, look, this is what the committee wants to say about this, right? So, Kristen, you've got a proposal. You've worked it through, you've made we've had a chance to read about it. And this is something that you want to present as a potential motion from the committee that ultimately would be a recommendation from us. And so that kind of a meeting is something where I would like to have a quorum of the committee. And I don't see that as a very frequent kind of meeting, maybe once every 6 weeks or maybe more frequently when we get to the fall. But that's an output meeting as opposed to a working meeting. So I don't want to complicate anything, but I want us to be able to sort of go, oh, these are the kinds of meetings we have. And to say that, again, we've got folks who can comfortably meet during the working day and folks who can't. We've got folks who can comfortably meet in the evening and folks who can't. And so, over the summer, really what I see is a lot of working meetings. And we may find that there's some natural fits in terms of, for example, Eric and Phil, Parashar and Phil, wanting to be able to have a working meeting together as it suits them. But I just want to, throw this out as a way of thinking about organizing our future meetings over the near term. Does this make sense, or is this too unstructured? Do we have concerns about that, or is it okay?
So Eric, I'm just curious, what's the difference between a quorum and a quorum?
So we're 9 people. A quorum is at least 5 of the whole committee. And a quorum would be anything less than 5.
I thought open meeting law didn't allow us to do that.
Maybe
Well,
like
a quorum, it's still a public meeting, right? We can't.
Vote. So,
Yeah.
if I might,
Yeah.
I think the open meeting law is going to require that, not only does your meeting have to be open, but you have to have a quorum of your meeting to do any business.
Oh,
If you have less than a quorum, that works if you've created a subcommittee,
I see.
because then the quorum is different. If
So we need
if you've created a
yeah.
subcommittee of, 4 people, then, 3
Yeah.
people is a quorum, and then you're good.
I
But
see.
people is not a quorum of a 9-member committee, and they can't do anything.
I
So
see. So we actually need a formal subcommittee to meet with less than 5 people. Yeah. All right.
So this is
Yeah.
why I think this is why the thought was make the work streams into a bit of a subcommittee, or we can have subcommittees come and go also. So
Yeah,
maybe for the
okay.
first phase, we organize a couple subcommittees. We
Right,
can go off and do the work and then come back and report to the broader committee.
yeah. Okay, all right. No, I understand. I'm sorry, I didn't get that earlier. So in terms of subcommittees, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask Carmen a clarifying question. With a committee our size, is there a minimum subcommittee requirement? Can it be a subcommittee of 2, or does it have to have like 3 or 4? Is there a minimum size requirement?
No, I don't think there's a minimum size requirement. I think you can do what
Perfect.
you want in terms of the size. You know,
Okay.
the open meeting law is a very modern convention, and it's also really Byzantine.
Right.
So I'm just trying to sketch out subcommittees for right now. I think, Keith, I'm gonna put you in with, communication, with B as well. So I'm gonna suggest, one subcommittee is, built around topic A. It's Phil and Parashar, and I can join that. And then, C and D, I see as a group together. Boy, I hate doing this live. And then, B and,
Or maybe A and E go together. What other
Okay.
towns are doing, what can we do with data?
okay,
And then B, C, and D might all go together.
Yeah, B's lonely.
okay. Yeah, B, C, and D. So let me think for just a second. Katie, you're a daytime person, but you can do evenings remote. Kristen, you have some constraints. Leslie, you're an evening person. So do these groups work well? B, C, D. Keith, Kristen. We don't have a D here. Then Parashar, you and Phil, and
I should put Eric Van Loon in that group. He said in
Yeah,
his note that he would be best suited to operations.
okay,
which is
so
kinda
that
what
is
we're talking about.
that is B.
That'd be A. Oh,
So-
either A or B, I guess, but
The other-
it seems more like
The
A.
other thing just to consider is let's not get the subcommittees too large, because then we run into the quorum. So
Yep.
this
Right.
is,
Say for E, I could always go off and do my work and then come
Yes.
back to folks.
Yeah,
I'm happy to do that,
Yeah.
given my childcare responsibilities. Not that I'm not interested.
no,
in
no,
work
and it's,
stream.
and it's more efficient for one person to do the data analytics and come back and report. That's great.
And if you have something, I think you can send it to Shannon, and Shannon could send it
Yeah.
out to all of us.
that's right.
Yes.
You need to
Okay.
see it ahead of time.
Yep.
Well, okay, I still need to look at this a bit. I'm sorry not to get this live. So we're looking at least a 3-person. We're gonna try to design for 3 people each in the subcommittees. Is that all right? Upper bound of
Yep.
3?
Yep.
So
Okay.
I have an idea, Eric, rather than
Yeah.
doing this live, why don't we just all vote to authorize you to assign 3 subcommittees? Having talked to
Okay.
everyone, filled out this chart, you
Right.
can at a later time, after you absorbed it all, you can assign us all and just send it out. You can send it to me and I will include it in the draft minutes.
Okay. Is there a motion? The motion would be have
To
Eric figure
auth-
out the subcommittees? Yeah.
Yeah, to authorize Eric to figure out the subcommittees and assign 3 subcommittees.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
not in
Great
here now.
idea.
Third.
So we need to vote because we're remote. So I'll call the roll. If Phil, you could record the votes, please. So Keith Bergman,
Aye.
Katie Bresnick,
Aye.
Kristen Haggerty,
I,
Alice Kaufman is not present. Leslie Kaplan,
Hi,
Eric Morse is aye. Parashar Patel,
Aye.
Phil Swain.
Aye.
All right, so moved. Good, we had a vote tonight. Yeah. Okay.
Erica,
fi-
I'm sorry to interrupt, Erica, but I'm gonna have to sign off. Do you have anything else? Any other questions for me before I have to sign off?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, all right.
Good,
Thank you
thank you.
all.
So,
I had a question, Eric, about, maybe it's procedural. Don't we need to ratify some minutes?
we don't
They're not
have
ready.
it tonight. We don't
Not
have it
ready.
tonight to ratify.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay, no worries.
Have
So,
we ratified any minutes? Cause I was on the website and I didn't see any minutes up yet.
I think we've ratified the ones that Katie wrote, but,
Okay, how did those
I-
get up there?
I'll follow up with the clerk's office.
Send
They,
it to a
they get
email address.
posted,
They
yeah.
posted, like the same day. But our video is up already, have the, well, of the last meeting at least.
Yeah, I was just looking at, if somebody was looking to see what our minutes have been, there's nothing there yet. There's just the agendas.
Not that bad.
It's
Compared.
It's not.
But that's good.
But I
Very
know we
diligent.
said in our first meeting, we were gonna be good.
Oh, okay.
Did we say that? Or is
Well,
it in the
actually-
minutes?
So I guess but that's a good question. Who, should the person who takes the minutes be responsible for sending them? Cause not everybody knows how to post them, or are we
No,
gonna say?
I think I probably
Okay,
should
so
have
Shannon,
done
okay.
that, yeah.
So once we approve them, then Shannon will be in charge, so we
Yeah.
don't, nobody else has to know how they get up there. Okay.
got it. We had one more item. I'm gonna defer this. I'll recognize that I didn't give the public opportunities to comment on some of these things that we did, contrary to expectations. I'm also gonna observe that we're at 9 o'clock. So I will make my apologies. I will send a proposal out for our next meeting, which won't be until after the 16th. And I will certainly send out the subcommittee proposals earlier than that. So
Quick
with
question.
that, sorry,
Okay, just ask, the email address, does that go to you, Shannon?
It goes to me and Eric.
You and Eric, and then so if anybody comments through the email address, then it gets attached to the meeting minutes, correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that, I want to say thank you, and I think I get to declare the meeting closed.